I'm Daison Pursley.
I'm Keith Kunz, and this is The Skinny.
From the Fatheads Eyewear Studios in Speedway, Indiana, this is The Skinny. Brought to you by Toyota, Rhino Classifieds, General Tire, and Dream Giveaway. This segment of The Skinny is brought to you by General Tire. It's more than just a slogan. Anywhere is possible with General Tire. General Tire's Grabber X3 mud terrain tire offers aggressive styling and is engineered for durability with innovative performance features that are ready to carry you through extreme mud, dirt, and rock-covered terrain. For extreme traction that's ready for anything and rugged styling to match, look no further than the Grabber X3. Make your anywhere possible by visiting GeneralTire.com today. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of The Skinny. Ken Stout and Rico Elmore in the house, and then one of the best of all time and still making tracks inside of the USAC series. We have Mr. Keith Kunz in the house, and one of his young guns, Daison Pursley, will join us as well. Looking forward to this show as they're kicking off the 2021 race season. Everybody's excited. Finally, I feel like we're getting past the pandemic stuff. At least we're all racing again, because a year ago we were not. If you're not familiar with Keith Kunz and Keith Kunz Motorsports, just to get you up to speed a little bit, this guy and his team have won the Chili Bowl 8 times. I believe at the end of 2020 had 114 midget wins inside of USAC alone and 10 championships, and that's the likes of 9 Racing. I mean, the best of all time. And I know we're going to talk about that a little bit further down the road, but you've had incredible drivers all along the way with you. Some of the superstars, Rico Abreu, Christopher Bell, Kyle Larson, Tony Stewart, Dave Darlin, Jay Drake, Tracy Hines, Colwitt, Brian Clausen. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And young guns, again, Buddy Cafoid, of course, doing a great job. Daison doing a great job. But you've had some of the best come up through your team and just go on to see the highest highs of this sport. And without question, if you're in the open wheel world and you know anything about midgets and sprint cars, you know Keith Kunz's name. And if you're a parent, you want to talk to Keith Kunz because you want your kid inside of a car. It doesn't matter what it is, but it's much easier said than done. But boy, oh boy, congratulations on all the success. And I know it hasn't come easily.
Yeah, thanks. No, it's just something I've done all my life, and I think if you do something long enough, you have success. And I've been very fortunate to have a lot of good drivers and a lot of good connections along the way, and got me to where I am today.
So you kick things off here, and I can go back to, I want to say it's about 1992 when you and your brother Rusty got your first win with, and I got to tell this funny little story because it hung me out. I was doing a live ARCA show, and we got to talk about Andy Hillenberg, and I thought it was the same Andy Hillenberg that ran in ARCA that won the Chili Bowl. But it's two different. I mean, what are the chances there's 2 Andy Hillenbergs in racing, but 2 different, not related at all, but you guys won the Chili Bowl with Oklahoma Andy Hillenberg. Wow. Not the one that ran in ARCA, but going back to 1992 with your brother, you enjoyed some success right off the bat, and I have some information here, of course, which we'll talk about all along the way, but you saw some success there early on with your brother.
92 is when we really took off. We got hooked up with Larry Howard and Paige Jones.
Great.
And Paige won my first USAC race for me at Kokomo. And that was in 92. And then 93, Paige won Belleville for me. And then January of 94, we won the Chili Bowl with Hillenberg. And so it was kind of a combination of that Belleville win in 93 and start the year off in 94 with Hillenberg and won the Chili Bowl. And that was what really launched everything.
I was just going to say, is that kind of what put you guys on the map? I mean, not that you weren't on the map before, but all of a sudden everybody's eyes are open.
Yeah, at that point, we were just 2 brothers. We worked jobs and did it as a hobby, and was able to get some good drivers and got hooked up with Paige and Larry Howard. And Larry really taught us how to race, and put us in connection with a lot of good racing manufacturer products and people, and surrounded ourselves with, Ivor Sanders from Hoosier and Corey Phillips from Advanced. And, just kind of got all the connections all of a sudden and learned how to really work on race cars and stuff like that, and was able to get good drivers, and got fortunate and won a couple big races. And it was after the Chili Bowl in '94, Gary Zerunian called me and wanted me to come out and help him with Sleepy Trip. And I went out there in, I think it was like April or something like that, and helped him. And I talked him into hiring me full time. Came back, talked to the wife, and packed up the kids, and we moved to California. And that was beginning of April, May, something like that, in '94.
Is that where the song came from? Packed up the kids and moved to Beverly?
Yeah. So, and at that time, I mean, we were, we were just really living paycheck to paycheck and living in a mobile home, and, growed up in the country and just backyard racers. And
scrapping.
I had a chance to go work on race cars for a living all of a sudden,
How old were your kids then?
Probably, 94, they would have been about 6, 7 years old.
Man.
Wow.
Twin
Tough
girls.
time.
Yeah, so, it was kind of it was a no-brainer to me, it was a jump in income. And,
I don't know what the big deal is. It's a great opportunity.
Yeah,
Load them up. Let's go.
I'm living in a mobile home, with wife and 2 kids, and barely make it. And, so we get a chance to go work for Zerunians, who were already had a name and everything, and moved to California. And probably the toughest thing was talking the grandparents all into it,
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that you were going to uproot their shelter far away. Yeah.
So, away we went, and went out there and worked with them for a little bit with Sleepy, and and Sleepy was a little bit past his prime at that point, and it just wasn't the same, and I kind of worked with him for a few months, and kind of got to a point where we weren't clicking and things weren't happening. So I kind of went to Gary and George and said, you really don't need me out here, and they were like, no, what do you want to do? I said, well, I'd like to run somebody else. So
they said, you got the job.
Yeah.
You want to hire somebody else. You're going to tell him he doesn't have a job anymore.
So I was the bad guy in the whole thing. From there, we actually hired Donnie Beechler. Okay. I knew Donnie from back here in Springfield, Illinois, and we got Donnie to come out and start running for us. And a couple of the bigger races, we had Steve Knipper drive for us, and Tommy Estes drove Belleville for us. And I won started winning at some races that year with Donnie Beechler. And then at the end of the year, won the 4 Crown with Steve Knipper in Zerunian stuff. And so at the end of '94, John Lawson, who was running out there locally with Billy Boat, he approached me and wanted me to come work for him, which they were in Fresno, just up the road from Visalia. So by November, John had hired me. So I left Zerunians and went up there and started working with him and Billy Boat for '95. And Zerunians kept Beechler, and went on and had a lot of success with him.
Were they mad that you left, but happy that they got a driver that was up to speed?
Yeah, they weren't real thrilled with me when I left. But I'd worked with them all through '94. So then my first race with Lawson is we go to the Chili Bowl in '95. And of course, who wins it? Donnie Beechler in Zerunian's car.
I'm sure they were grinning. A little payback.
Yeah,
a little karma. There you go, buddy.
Yeah.
So, then '95, I worked with John and Billy, and that was another explosion year for me. We had so much success with Billy. Won 30-something races, a lot of national races. And that was, when we were in California, everybody kind of on the midget scene was like, well, they're California, or winning Western States races and all that. Well, when the national races all came, Billy won them all. Well, you're on the West Coast. So then we came back and we won Belleville and, won some
I think people
here.
still say that.
Yeah.
Oh, they can run all the California tracks, but they can't run here. And
well, it's still kind of true, right? Wouldn't you agree? I mean, the California guys say when the Midwest boys come out, we'll know where we really stand.
Yeah. But that's back then, it was the same thing. They're West Coast guys. You're only as good as the guys you run against. but we beat all the national guys when they came out, and and came back to Belleville, and that really kind of solidified it for everybody. How good Billy really was. Then we kind of finished the year off. I think we won 30-something races that year, and then we started '96 off at the Copper World, and we were doing a little bit of pavement out there. We were running the pavement on the West Coast and all that. And we had a combo car, and of course you had the 9 team.
Yep.
And we went to Phoenix and won Phoenix with Billy.
Oh, wow.
In a combo car.
So who was running for the 9 then?
Kenny Irwin and Tony, Kearney, and I think it might have been
I think it was Tony.
Tony. I think it was Tony, yeah.
I think that's right, yeah.
Yeah, because I just watched it the other day, and Tony kind of faded, and it was Kenny and Billy kind of broke away. And Kenny had it 1 going into turn 3 and kind of got trapped behind the lap car, and Billy drove around him. So
it's interesting, and especially what watching Chad Boat come through, and now of course what he's doing, being a team owner, which with success.
Yep, he's taken the car owner route here and knowing how to work on them and being a driver. He's been very successful.
That's what Tony always said. He says, yeah, that kid hasn't met the wall quick enough to realize that doesn't feel good.
Yeah. And that's how I ended up where I'm at. In 1986, I started driving.
That was going to be one of my questions. I was going to work Daison in here, but I was going to say, do you realize he drove? He was actually a driver at one point.
1986, I started driving. I've been around. I didn't know anything, and wasn't any good driving, and had my own car. And my dad said, my brother had been driving it, and some other people, and Dad's like, we're going to Granite City. You drive it. So I got in and drove and did pretty decent, or did all right. So I drove like in 86 and then part of 87. I was running St. Louis and Dairyland, and I crashed it at the Beaver Dam Fairgrounds. I spun out and kind of was sitting there in the middle of the corner, and I kind of look and I see a car coming and coming and coming. And just drove right in the side of me, and it took the wind out of me, and I couldn't breathe for what seemed an eternity. And I was hurt. I was hurting, didn't go to the hospital or anything, but on the way home, my dad he go to me, he says, I'm not raising your kids, you're done. That was it. And that was the end of it.
Scared Dad, and he was like, that's not worth it.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna take the blame for this one.
Yeah, he says, I'm not raising your kids, So from then on, I was able to get guys like Kevin Olson and Kevin Doty and Roger Branson, and some of them guys drive
Kevin
for
Olson.
me.
Well, I mean, if you put Olson in the car, you have no fear. So
no fear, no sense. I mean,
and that's kind of how I started really learning how to work on a car, because the car was up front all of a sudden, and you could do things and see what really understand it. So.
Somebody was moving the car the right way and knew what was going on with it.
Yep.
Yeah.
They knew what they wanted, and it was teaching you as well.
Yeah, it was teaching me as well. Right. So I was very fortunate I had good drivers to feed off of along the way and learn.
Then 97 comes along, and you and Pete Willoughby hook up, and you wake up the sleeping giant who thought they had them all covered.
Yep.
You go out, finish 1-2 in the championship. But
at the end of 96, John called me and said, hey, there's this guy over here who's wanting to start a midget team. He's got a car. His name's Pete Willoughby, and would you be interested in it? So I called, talked to Pete a little bit, and I came back to Terre Haute, the Hut 100, at the end of 96, and met him. And we kind of struck a deal right there, and, said 97 we'll start up. And he had a kid driving for him. I can't even think, AJ, I can't remember his name. He was driving for him, and AJ Davis. And he got hurt somewhere on pavement and broke his neck, and didn't paralyze him, but he was out for a while. And that was kind of going to be his kid, because he came up through goat carts, and Pete was into goat carts, and so then I came back, and this was like right before the Chili Bowl, and Jason actually came back. Jason Leffler came back and drove for Pete at the 100, and they run second that year, and Jason was really close with my brother Rusty because of Larry Howard, and they had already kind of struck a deal to come bring Jason back in '97. You know, they knew I was coming back to work on the cars, and Rusty lived in Springfield, and he would come to the tracks and take care of Jason, and I was going to take care of, you know, the whole team. And then with that kid being hurt, going into Chili Bowl, Pete said, "Who we want to get for the other guy?" And I instantly said Jay Drake, and Jay was in New Zealand racing. And he says, "Well, think you can get him for the Chili Bowl?" So I called Jay, and he wasn't planning on coming back. And I said, "Hey, you know, this deal that I went to, you know, we want to do the whole national deal. Would you be interested?" So Jay left his New Zealand deal right in the middle of it and came back to run the Chili Bowl. So
I wonder if that's when he wrecked
Clay Klepper.
I wonder if that's when he wrecked Clay.
That was, that was somewhere in the next year. I might have been that year. Yeah,
we were on the show, and of course Rob is talking. Talking about, and then of course he's talking about Jay, and Jay's like, "Well, man, you know, I don't know. You know, it's all kinds of pissed.
Yeah, again, and talking about Klepper in '97, I was chatting with him, and he said, I remember going to Winchester one year. He said, I think it was around 1997. He said, and it's the first time we'd been there. He said, and I saw Keith. He said, I didn't really know him. He said, so I told Clay. He said, I knew he knew a lot. He said, so I told Clay. He said, I said, go over there and talk to that guy. He's been here before. He's good. Like, just see what you can get from him. And sure enough, he says he comes back. He said he kind of got us in the window, gave us springs and bars, and kind of told us where to go. He says, but the key thing that he said was, there's a bump going into turn number 1, and you got to either turn down underneath it, or you got to wait till you get past the turn, because if you turn the wheel and then hit it, you're going to flip out of the park. And then Clay's description was, and probably die. So
a lot of truth to that.
They got the message.
Yeah. So that's how kind of '97 started off. You know, with Pete Willoughby being the owner, and Jay Drake, Jason Leffler as our drivers. You know, and the 9 car was the team at that point. You know,
is that when Jason was living with Tony down there? Is this when you guys were in Columbus then?
Yeah, we were in Columbus. Yeah, Jason was living with Tony, and I think Jay came over and lived with Pete.
That's when Tony was talking about they were racing the Honda 50s in the backyard.
Yeah, he had like a garage, and it had like 2 posts in it, and we would race around the post on that thing. I mean,
well, this one
it was pretty vicious.
This one that Tony was talking about was where they had the shop lights strung out in the backyard. And when he was passing Leffler and reach over and hit the kill switch on their bike, go by him, and then they're trying to get it started back up, and then kick their leg out from under, drop them over. It's like.
So, Daison, you've been perfect on the show so far. You haven't made a single mistake.
You're doing great. Now here's your time.
2017 Micro Champ, right, for USAC?
Yeah, that was. I think Port City was kind of sanctioned, and then now 600 was sanctioned by USAC. So, that was pretty cool to kind of pick up that with, my family and my dad, just traveling a little bit. And I know I felt like that kind of definitely put my name out there in the USAC when we got to go to the USAC banquet and, end up being around all these people. That was definitely pretty cool.
And I think the first time I met him was probably then.
It was probably then. I think definitely then, or maybe the following Chili Bowl after that. It was one of those.
It was. It might have been at the banquet there, because I didn't realize this at the time until after he had been with me for maybe the first year or something. His mom posted this picture, and there was this little kid all dressed up at the banquet, and he came up to me and said, "I want to drive for you someday."
Oh, that's awesome!
And here we are 3 years later driving for him.
That's awesome.
Well, and he worked for you for a couple of years too. Is that correct? Did you work on the crew at the Chili Bowl?
No.
I thought you had worked on the crew for a couple of years before you actually drove for him.
So this is your third year?
Third year.
So he started driving for me in 2019.
Yep.
Would have been his first year.
Did you win your first 2 heat races, USAC heat races?
Yeah, at Arizona. I wasn't old enough to run it that year. The very first year I started, I could only run Power Eye, and then my birthday is October 20th, so I could run the West Coast swing. And then, very, very first 2 USAC heat races at Arizona and ended up picking up those. Yeah.
So good success. Do you consider your Chili Bowl this year a success?
Yeah, it was honestly really cool.
You're happy with it, with the results? I mean, I don't know. I get it that everybody wants to go to the top, but I mean, all things considered.
Yeah, I mean, you only get to do, get rookie of the race one time, or you only get to try it once, and we were able to do that. So that was definitely a good goal of mine going into the week. But of course, you always want to make the AMA, and definitely came up a couple spots short than that. But good efforts for sure.
Yeah, you had a good run there. I think you came out of the B on Tuesday night and then ended up 9th in the A. I mean, from deep, I want to say 17th or something like that.
Yeah, it was definitely something like that. And, the last couple laps happened to, rubber up around the bottom. But that's just, how it goes sometimes. And the Chili Bowl this year was definitely different than it has been years past with the track and, the pandemic and everything.
Yeah. And then second in the C on Saturday and then 10th in the B.
I think it was 10th. Yeah, we were up to
a couple spots away, man.
We were up to like 8th or so, and then the yellow came out, and I had to give up a couple of those spots. But it was definitely cool just to finally turn 16 and finally get to race on Saturday night. It was pretty amazing.
Stay with us. We're going to take a quick break here. We have more from the young gun sitting right alongside the legend, Keith Kunz himself. This segment of The Skinny is brought to you by Toyota. Once again, welcome back to The Skinny. This is our Toyota Behind the Wheels segment, and we couldn't have two better players than Factory Toyota guys here. I guess it's safe to say Factory Toyota. Keith Kunz, once again, Daison Pursley sitting alongside, and one of the development drivers for Toyota is Daison, and certainly you've seen that path work very nicely for Christopher Bell as he makes it up to the top. I think an interesting story, which was a real big learning lesson for Toyota, was Kyle Larson, of course. And Kyle Larson coming up through the ranks with you, and you're Toyota sponsored, and a great relationship with them. And I want to talk about that too, how that all came about when the switch happened, because it wasn't like we switched to Toyota and went right to the top. It took a little scrap and a little learning, but for the development driver, the young gun over there, how exciting is it to at least be on the radar screen?
It's definitely something that you got to take a lot of pride in and pleasure in for sure. So to be hooked up with Keith Kunz and everyone at Toyota is pretty amazing. And just like you said, to kind of watch Christopher Bell grow up kind of at Port City where I'm growing up at, and it's pretty cool to try to follow his footsteps all the way to the top, as that would be the cup cars. So that's definitely one of my goals, and I feel like I'm definitely on the way to doing that.
So how does that relationship happen, Keith? Who found him? Toyota find him, or did you find him?
He kind of found me.
He told him he wanted to drive for him. Don't you remember that already?
His dad came over and seen us, and they were just trying to decide what to do. And his dad came over and seen me and Pete, and kind of talked to us for a while. And before we left Gateway, he said, "This is what I'm going to do."
So is that an option with you? Can a dad come over and talk to you and sign his son up, or do you take? I would think that you're in a position now, and given your limited amount of time because of everything that you do and the sheer number of cars that you handle, that you're going to pick the cream of the crop. You're not just going to say yes to somebody.
And that's the question everybody always wants to know is, how's it work with Keith Kunz Motorsports? We run Keith Kunz Motorsports as a business. Most people in racing have something to fall back on, a business that supports their racing. And me and Pete have been able to do racing as a living. And it's crazy to think of in midget and sprint car racing that you can do that. But that all kind of came about in 1999. Pete owned a trucking company, and the trucking company went under. And I was on the payroll there working for Pete. And, at that point, he came to me and said, "Hey, we're going to close down the trucking company." And I was like, well, I'll go talk to John. I can go somewhere and work on race cars, And he's like, "No." He said, "Let's just race." He said, "Let's just race and see how long we can survive." At that time, we had Jay Drake driving for us. And I called all the sponsors up with a race car, and Earl Gertie and John Godfrey, and they all said that they would stick with me. So we formed Keith Kunz Motorsports at that point. And we raced for a living just by hiring good guys to go win races. And then eventually, I got parents that come to me and say, "How do I get my kid in your car?" Some money.
It costs money.
Costs money.
It costs money. It costs either a sponsorship or it costs money.
And that's the thing is, everybody that's jealous out there wants to say, rich kids. Well,
I would do the same thing for mine, and every parent would. And
every parent out there, and what those
I'm broke.
What those other guys though is their parents all help them,
right?
Whether they're running their own team or whatever, somebody's paying for it,
right?
So whether you come to me and hire me to run a team and put your kid in my car, or you're going to spend the money yourself, it's the same thing.
I mean, I was sitting there. I was sitting there talking to
Except
Barber.
they get you.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was sitting there talking to Barber, Brett, and we were just talking. And he goes, "What do you?" He was here earlier, and I said, we're getting ready to do a show. Keith Kunz, one of his guys, coming in, and so we're sitting there, and he says, "Yeah," he goes, "what a deal he has going on." I said, "It's a great business, but you know what? It's a great business that he loves. I'm in the eyewear business. Have I always loved it? No. Have you always loved racing? No, because it's just the way it is. Right. It is business, right? And, if it wasn't, it'd be called a vacation, and, you wouldn't have to worry about that. But at the end of the day, Brett goes, "Yeah, I didn't think that was a good deal when, when we were doing our thing." He goes, "Now I got a garage full of useless stuff."
Yep.
Yeah.
And still, I still paid the same,
And that's the thing is I think when a lot of the parents that come to ours are good business people, and they look at it as they got, $300,000-$400,000 investment in their truck and trailer, and they got to go buy cars and motors and what they spend a year. And by coming to us, we can get you up to speed instantly almost.
Yep.
The learning curve, what will take you 5 years, we can do in a year.
Yep. And that's a lot of money.
That's a lot
of savings right there.
So, or you can stand there and look at it and think, I can buy a midget and I can buy this, and I got a truck. We'll get a trailer. We don't need all that. We're not carrying 5 cars, but whenever you walk over, if you take a look at a winning program like yours and you walk into the shop, the first thing I ask myself is, how long is it going to take me to catch that guy?
Yeah.
Because I know what the answer is. The answer is never.
Right.
I'm never catching that guy.
In the end, it's always the same teams that run up front, whether it's myself, the 9-car, Clausen Marshall, Boat, no matter who they bring along and develop, they always end up going to the front. Yeah, and we get guys, there's little teams out there that can come in and compete with you. But not day after day after day, and learning how to run for championships, and knowing that you got to finish races, and going from racetrack to racetrack, and already knowing how to talk to these kids and tell them where to run at and where their groove is.
It's the exact same thing that you said about Winchester.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I mean, who doesn't go down in and want to go, "Oh wow, that's bad."
So we've over the years we've had parents come to us. And we've always hired guys to run our house car, which was Jay Drake, Kyle Larson, Christopher Bell, and the whole Toyota thing kind of evolved, I mean, there was some pretty lean years there where, me and Pete only took enough to pay our bills, and everything else went back into assets, buying cars and building the team. And, Cole Witt's dad came to us in 2008, and they were running, he was just 16, running a local sprint car. And I think he went to Bubby Jones, and Bubby actually told him, said, "You need to go see Keith." So they came to us and run the midget and sprint car, and Cole was 16 that year, and we won the USAC championship. He
was tough.
Yeah. So at the end of 2008, when we won the championship, Steve Lewis had been with Toyota, I think, for 3 years. I think they started like in 2005, maybe. And that's when Toyota first came on the scene. And at the end of 2008, Steve Lewis decided he was going to quit. And I think part of that was, Bob East was kind of already tied in with Ford, and they kind of split a little bit there. And, the magic had all kind of went away, and, everybody caught up a little bit. And so at the end of 2008, Toyota came to us and said, we want Cole Whitten, the champion, running a Toyota. We can give you the Steve Lewis deal, which was basically they was going to supply motors for Cole, was it. So we did it, and, went out in 2009 and really struggled. Went from winning 6 races that year to not winning a race at all.
You're kind of like a
barely,
top 5, top 10
barely
car,
run
right?
a top 5.
Yeah.
It was a 7th, 8th
car,
place
yeah.
car all of a sudden, every night. And we did that through 2009, and then, Cole moved on after that, went to NASCAR with the Red Bull stuff. So at the beginning of 2010, I had Dave Darlin running the dirt and Brian Clausen running the pavement for me. And Brian was running the pavement in my stuff, and then his family car on the dirt. And again, we struggled with both of those guys all year long. Never won a race.
And didn't Dave was driving the 9 stuff before, right?
Yeah,
When
he'd
he
been
had
driving. Yeah, he'd already been in the 9 car.
Yeah.
So what do you think had happened because the 9 car was so dominant? That
Well,
it was
even
so
when they
good.
when they were in the Toyota stuff, they weren't that
Oh, they
dominant.
weren't.
They weren't.
It was
They won a
such a-
couple races, like
Yeah.
at Phoenix and that, maybe, I think, with Dave Steele. Some of the big tracks.
Yeah, it was something where they could get them really
Yeah,
strung out.
yeah.
But in the beginning, building
And the
it-
Toyota thing was all about, they built all them motors with Larry Slutter, kind of was the developer of the whole thing.
And Pink.
But they did them all at TRD, and Slutter was kind of there. And it was all about the big number on those things is all they ever kind of looked at. And Rick Long at Speedway had been doing my Mopar sprint car stuff, and he was doing all Casey Kane stuff, and he was doing Casey's midget motors, and Brad Sweet was killing everybody with the Mopar stuff.
killing them.
Yeah. So in 2010, I kind of got to the point, and I got to the point where I told him, I can't keep going on like this. I'd been asking him, let Rick Long have a motor. Let Rick Long have a motor. Well, at some point through that year, they got together, I think, with Gary Stanton and Rick Long, and they developed a new head and new injection on it. And we got the very first one going into Turkey Night and with Brian, and we hadn't won a race in 2 years. And we went out and dominated Turkey Night. We went out and hot lapped, and I went, we got something finally. We can race now.
So I was partners with 6R when the whole Silver Crown thing,
Yep.
Went on, and we had Brian Tyler and Magurios, right? And man, those engines were wild.
Yeah.
I mean, just, so Toyota builds these brand new engines for Cup, or for the Truck Series. And then they changed them. They changed them the next year, so they have this massive amount of money in these engines. Well, I was able to get sponsored. We got sponsored 6 of them.
Well, they actually sent a couple to short course off road too,
Yeah.
Right.
which was Greaves,
Right.
but it was so the power band was so narrow.
Yep.
It was just whenever it hit, it would knock tire off, but the drivability wasn't there really for short course, with a long RPM band. But
Right. So Claxton reworked those engines, and Claxton, he's crazy anyhow, but Claxton's like, you wouldn't believe the insides of these, and is how they. So the thing of it was, so the next year they came and they had to have a new engine. Well, I mean, Toyota went right back after him again. That's when they started putting restrictor plates on Toyota stuff. But
and that's what they did when they kind of built the midget motor, was they used the truck head. They had all them truck heads laying around, and that's what they used on the midget motor. So
Shaggy was in the middle of all this.
Yeah,
at this
Shaggy
point,
was
right?
all. Yeah, Shaggy was all in the middle of it. Still to this day, Shaggy is the guy. That
Great friends
that they
of
work with.
ours. Yeah,
we don't tell many people that. But
I thought about having him try to call in today. To be honest,
he
with
won't
you.
do it.
Yeah.
He snubs us.
So at the end of 2000, we've won Turkey Night, and then Brian was going back to run his family car in 2011 full time. So me and Pete was like, we need somebody that can compete with Brian, and we needed to hire a new guy for 2011. And again, Toyota were just kind of supplying us motors for our house car, and we were doing some rental stuff and had some Esslingers and some Fontanas, and so we were at. I'd been out to Paris at the end of 2010 and watched the USAC sprint cars, and Kyle was driving for Glenn Crosno, and he was back there running 8th or 9th, and it might have been Tim Clausen I was there with, and I asked him, I said, who is in that car? And he told me, he said, I'll see this kid. He said, he's really good. So he gets out of the car and he's this little kid,
it was like the right rear was bigger than that.
Yeah. So we were at the Chili Bowl, to start 2011. I don't know who I had driving for me at that point. But we had about 5 guys on our list that we wanted, kind of trying to figure out who to get for 2011. And I told Pete, I said, go over and watch this kid. That's that kid I was telling you about. And so he's in Glenn Crosno's midget. He goes out in hot laps, and Pete comes back to me and goes, that's our guy. It was strictly watching him in hot laps, and that was it. So the rest of the week kind of went on, and Kyle was really fast. And I think he's out in a heat race or something, and sitting there in the pits, the car's that high off the ground, and it's like, and he's driving the crap out of this thing, and he turns it over, and I mean big time up in the fence and everything else. And Pete comes back to me, and goes, that's still our guy. So, and he'd been talking to him and through the week, and finally, eventually asked him, said, him and his parents, and said, would you like to come back and run the USAC national deal for us, for 2011? And Kyle was like, well, I don't know. I want to go sprint car racing. And, you listen to his dad tell it, and he's like, Kyle, you know who these guys are, but they kind of had hopes. Kyle had hopes, and they'd been running some sprint car stuff, and he wanted to go World of Outlaw racing at that point. So, it took them 2 or 3 weeks, and they called us and said, yeah, and we hired him. Kyle, didn't bring a dime to the table at all, contrary to what everybody believes. And we kind of started the season off in I think we went to Tucson, and he won a couple races, and started the season off with USAC, and he was getting better and better, and we bought a Silver Crown car to kind of help him, and he went out, and first time out in a Silver Crown car, set quick time at Milwaukee, and Robin Miller was there, and Robin was a big instrument, I think, in Kyle's career. I knew Robin, and he had kind of seen him and instantly knew, and he was telling all the IndyCar guys, you need to watch this guy.
He told Stewart.
Yeah.
He said, you better get him.
Yeah.
And remember, he was talking about that when he was here.
Kyle went out and practiced there at Milwaukee that day, and I think Robin Miller had the whole paddock watching him, and all the Ganassi. Mike Hall was a good friend of ours, and he was watching him, and he had him over there on the box and stuff, and so Toyota at that point was just kind of getting involved, and Lee White was the president, and he wasn't a great open wheel fan, so Gary Reed was trying to feed Kyle through the NASCAR system, and took him around and introduced him, and everywhere they went, somebody's like, "Oh yeah, great, but who's going to pay for it?" And we went to Indy in May, and I went up there with Kyle to meet some people, and it was through Spire Motorsports at that point. The guy says, "Hey," he says, "we're going to go up and meet Tony George Jr." He was in charge of the IRL at that time. So I was like, and that was kind of all of a sudden. So we went up there thinking, okay, yeah, they want to see Kyle Larson, and we really hadn't. You could tell he was going to be good, but nothing had really happened at that point. So we went up and met him, and same thing. In the end, he's like, "Well, who's going to pay for this? What do you do? How much money you got?" And I was like, "No,
Wrong guy.
Well, but the problem is, that's what's happened to the sport.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
all of these, these Johnny Parsons, these AJs, these Marios, all these guys like that, they come along, and what these promoters, like Agajanian, he knew how to do it.
Right.
Yeah, he paid these guys to get there no matter what. Hey, and Bobby Unser was on Uncle Bobby, love him, was on the show with us and was telling us about, racing for ag and this and that. But if you don't have a show and you got a bunch of, I don't know who they are, right? And IndyCar did miss it.
Yep.
And IndyCar missed the mark by missing Kyle.
Yeah.
They were the first ones to miss it. And I can assure you this, because I know the inner workings of Toyota and what you're talking about. By the time that deal was over with Kyle, they were never going to let that happen again.
Yeah.
We're going to take a quick break here. We'll be back on the other side and tell you the final chapter of the Kyle Larson story and involvement with Toyota. So hang tight. We'll be right back. And once again, welcome back to, what's the name of this thing?
Yeah. It's with Rico and Ken, I know that.
Big sign on. They call it the Skinny. It's absolutely no reference to Rico or myself. Keith Kunz here on the show. Daison Pursley also along with us. And in this Toyota Behind the Wheel segment that we were covering, we're going to extend it here a little bit because we want to hear the end of this story that involved Kyle Larson as he developed and came onto your team. Obviously a hugely successful driver in open wheel racing with USAC. Not much more he couldn't have won, along the way. But now he's a wanted item for the big teams. You've got the biggest of bigs looking at him, and Ganassi ends up snagging him away. And of course, the key factor there is Ganassi was Chevrolet at the time.
Yeah. And that was at the end of 2011, and David Wilson took over the president of TRD, and David being the big open wheel fan, they all kind of was surprised because they had this guy right there in the palm of their hand, and none of us had any contracts. Everything was a handshake, and Ganassi stepped in and said, I'll take a chance on Kyle, and then Kyle had the success in the trucks and stuff like that, and that's when Toyota, David and Tyler Gibbs and Jack Irving came to us and said, go out and find us another Kyle Larson.
So, quick question, I've often wondered. I should just ask Chip about it at some point, I guess, or Kyle. But I had heard that the diversity program had something to do with that as well. When Chip was able to take advantage of that, is that correct?
Yeah. The way I understand it was, basically, Spire was kind of trying to become Kyle's manager at that time, and they went to Chip, and I think Chip basically said, "Here's, I don't know what it was, $200,000-$300,000. Let's get him in some ARCA stuff, and this is our budget for the upcoming year." Well, at the same time, they got Kyle into the NASCAR diversity program, which was the K&N East stuff. And basically it didn't even cost Ganassi hardly nothing that first year because it was all through the NASCAR diversity program. He run the K&N deal and won it on a last lap deal at the end of the season, won the championship and all
Was
that.
that Max Siegel's
Yeah,
deal?
yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, they still have that now. You know, they have that diversity program, and
I met Max Siegel. Not to get too far off here, I met Max when he was the president of DEI, and we were at a at a bar. I know it was the first time I'd ever went to a bar, but we were at a bar and he came up to me. He said, "Are you Rico Elmore?" And like, yeah. And he says, "I'm Max Siegel," and I'm like, okay. So I didn't know why he was asking. Then he gave me his card. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, that's cool. So, but then shortly after that, he started that K&N thing, which is really, really super cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, you know, at that point, they came to us and said, find another guy, you know, and, you know, we kind of got to meet Jack Irving and Tyler Gibbs and really meet those guys that
Good people.
could make things
Right.
happen, you know.
Jack Irving's super. I've talked to him, I don't know how many times along the way, just trying to understand what Toyota was looking for in drivers at the time. 'Cause I wanted to obviously try to work my son in. I talked to you at the time, but
Yep.
he had already passed the window for you know the drivers that they were looking at.
Yeah.
And he said it's part my fault. He said I think we're looking at guys too young sometimes. He said, but it's partly my fault. He said we're looking at kids that are 13 years old, 12, 13, 14 coming up through.
Yeah, and that's what they were doing, you know, for the longest time. They were looking at real young kids because they were looking at, you know, the investment for the length of term that they're going to get them and kind of, you know, and Jack's the guy, I mean, he watches everything that goes on. I mean, he knows everything that's going on with kids coming up,
Yeah.
you know, that, I mean,
He's the professional baseball scout, if
Yeah,
you will.
yes.
You know?
That's
Yes.
That's a good way
That's
of putting it.
exactly,
Yeah,
you
for
know.
sure.
Yeah.
I mean, kids don't even know that he's looking at them, but he knows who's who of who in coming up through racing. So we actually, Kyle was a big part of us hiring Christopher. Was Pete went to Kyle, or Christopher had actually raced against us in that 21 car that he was driving back then. And we were at Granite City. He was parked right next to us. And Kyle was driving for us. And he run Kyle's ass off in the heat race, you know. And, you know, and he gets out of the car and he looks all, you know, baby faced. And he looked like Jason Myers. That's what he reminded me
Right.
of,
Oh,
you know, and
okay,
I knew
yeah.
Jason. So he reminded us of a young Jason Myers. And we went, I think, to Spoon River, and he run second to us maybe, and that was what I knew of him, you know. So Pete went to Little Rock, Arkansas, the short track nationals to watch. I don't know if he was watching Kyle or watching something, and Christopher was there, and I think he might have been in Furco's stuff at that time, and he runs second almost every night. And Pete called me and said, "Remember that kid that was parked next to us?" Yeah. He said, "This kid's good," and Kyle was one that told him, you know, told Pete to really watch him. So at the end of that year, we kind of was like, well, let's give him a shot at the Chili Bowl, you know. So Pete had called him and hired him to run the Chili Bowl. And he made it, I think, to the B main. Was never anything spectacular. There was nothing that just really wowed you. But there was something there that told us, you know, everybody asks us what you see in them guys, and you don't know what it is. It's just, there's something that just says, this kid can do it, you know. And so, again, we asked him to drive for us in 2012, and pretty big shoes to fill, you know, Kyle Larson,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And he just went out and exploded on the scene, you know, won the championship in his rookie year.
Yeah.
And, you know, and Toyota was just, at that point, they're just ecstatic, you know, this kid. And that's when they said, we don't know how we're going to do it,
But we're going to lock him up.
but we're going to figure out a way to do something here, you know. And it took all year, and by the end of the year, they were trying to create this path, you know. And Jack Irvin and Tyler Gibbs was the mastermind of that. And it was basically, you know, start here with Keith Kunz, you know, we'll get you in a super late model at Joe Gibbs, and then, you know, or with Kyle Busch, and then, you know, maybe a truck race the following year. And, you know, it was like a 7-year plan to bring somebody up through Well, you know, Christopher went and did the super late model thing and started winning in that instantly, and you know, promised him. I think it was 2013. I think they might have promised him one race in a truck, you know, and it led to 6 races or 7 races, you know, and you know, that's how they created the whole Toyota driver development thing, was all around Christopher Bell, you know, and they didn't know how to do it. It was kind of always a moving target. But the thing with Toyota is they always underpromised, you know. They would never think that they couldn't. They would always do more than what they could ever say they would, you know.
Under promise, over
eventually.
deliver.
Yeah, and it was kind of a thing, you know, you just put your trust in them, and you know, they always did what they said they would do or more. So we've always tried to put our trust in them, and, you know, and our drivers, and you know, and that's how the whole thing kind of has developed over the years, and you know, and it's evolved, and you know, they've created what they call a performance center down there now, where you know, they bring the kids in that are, and do media training with them, you know, they have a doctor, a coach, and do physical training, and you know, do a concussion test at the beginning of the year, and you know, weigh them and check their fat content, and have got all of our kids on.
We're done.
Yeah,
Bing! Over in the red.
they've got them all of our kids.
They're out.
I want to see Kevin Olson pass the
concussion protocol.
You know, they've got all the kids on health nutrition diets. You know, because their big thing they've learned.
This is unreal.
Yeah,
Wow.
they've learned that, you know, in these 500-mile races, you know, it's not only physical, but it's mental at the end of these races, you know, and that's all about your health and stuff like that. So, you know, that's been
Given everything that's equal, my limited time inside of an off-road car, I mean, I was just struggling to make it to the end of the race. But the good guys, and given everything's equal in equipment, the guy that's in a little better shape,
Right.
There's one guy that's getting tired, and he wants to go, and then there's another guy that's not tired and he's hungry.
Yeah.
You know, and he's like,
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
waiting for the last
Yeah.
5 laps. I'm
you know,
gonna
and that was
kill
their
it.
thing. It was, you know, they've learned that the mental sharpness at the end of the 500-mile races makes a difference, you know.
There's simulators down there at TRD.
Yep, they have
Wow.
the world's best simulators, you know, and they've gotten all of our kids on it. Daison's been there, you know, pretty consistently this year, running the stock car stuff, and Buddy and Kaylee, and they've really helped all of our kids kind of give them the opportunities to showcase their talent, and then in the end, it's all 100% performance based. You know, they can give you all the opportunities in the world, but in the end, you have to get results.
So another great Toyota driver that was before the turn, right? Mm-hmm. Cody Swanson.
Yep, exactly.
So it's like, you know, we are very involved with him, of course, and
Yep.
have been for a long time. And it's like, I mean, he went down and ran that World Series of stock cars or whatever it was
at Numa Summer. Yeah, I went down there and watched, and I was absolutely shocked that I seen him there, for one. And I mean, he was competitive and run up front every night. He ended up winning one. I think
He won the whole thing.
won the whole thing for the pros. Yep.
But I told him, I said, here's the deal. I said, so he raced the ARCA race at Iowa. Mm-hmm. And when he was done, he was all upset, you know, and I'm sorry I let you down. I wouldn't blame you if you never sponsor me. I mean, the dude is the hardest person on himself.
Yeah.
And I mean, before he ever went out, I put my arm around him and I said, listen, here's one thing I'm going to tell you. Or I said, I'm going to tell you something. I said, go be safe and have fun. I said, the rest of it will work its way out. Okay. I said, you just go do that and it'll help. It'll happen. So anyhow, he goes down and he tells me, he goes, I want to go run this. What do you think? And I said, okay, well, let me see what all the deal is and this and that. So he gets me the information. We already had somebody running in it, but he wanted to run it and I want to help him. So anyhow, I said, okay, well, what's the deal? And So he tells me the deal. I said, okay, I'm in. I'll do it. And I said, but one rule. He said, what's that? I said, if you don't put a bumper on somebody a little, I said, you're done. I'm never doing another thing with you in a stock car again. He's like, well, I just really want to, race them clean. I said, I didn't tell you to park them. Just put a bumper on them. Let them know you're there or something, okay?
And I think after 2 or 3 nights, he learned, and I think he finally did for the end of the week.
It's all part of the fun in that
Yeah.
world. It's not like open wheel so much. Let's pause for a moment here to take a quick break. This segment of The Skinny is brought to you by Dream Giveaway. Dream Giveaway has been giving away high-end American muscle cars to raise money for charity since 2007. Dream Giveaway is known for giving away classic and new muscle and paying the federal taxes so the winners don't have to. For $25, you can jump in the game, and part of that goes to charity. You'll have a chance at winning some of the coolest cars on the planet. Check it out at dreamgiveaway.com. Say, you had a great year last year in both Power Eye and in USAC as you were making some noise over there. Grabbed your first national win in Power Eye last year and 5th in the points, so solid effort there. And obviously in USAC didn't get a win, but you were inside of the top 5 there a handful of times as well. So what's the goal this year? Matter of fact, by the way, we have to congratulate him fresh off a win last weekend.
Thank you guys. Nice. I appreciate that. But definitely a goal would be, to pick up that first USAC win would definitely be something. And, maybe about Indiana Midget Week or a little bit after that, maybe look at the point standings and, see where we are at that. But, to get that first USAC win off our chest will be, something that we're going to look forward to. And, I definitely think we have a shot at it for sure.
We watch you guys grow, and it's part of the fun. And I know Keith loves it too. It's fun to watch you guys gain that confidence and then start flexing a little bit. Not just, okay, I found my space, but I need a little bit of that space now too. So I'm going to go take some. But after a year of racing at that level and with the talent that you've been with, you feel great about coming in this year? I mean, the confidence high?
It definitely is. And then, you don't know where you kind of rack up going into the year besides the first race. And, we were able to click off 2 top 5 finishes at Florida. So, our confidence was really good after that. And, just kind of like you said, the equipment's there and there's usually no excuses there. So it's usually up to you to, find the results that you want to find. And, it's definitely kind of, I guess you could say, threatening when you're racing against Wyndham and stuff that have more experience than you do being alive. So you just kind of look at that. But at the end of the day, you guys are all race car drivers and you all want the same thing. And that's, of course, to win.
I'd bet you that if you looked up his stats in the last 20, 25 races, he ain't finished out of the top 5 unless it was a DNF, And so we ended the season really, really strong. Almost got him a win. That was probably one of his DNFs, running second and last lap and got upside down trying to beat Meswell.
Trying to take it.
Yeah, kind of trying to step it up.
But what a difference in frame of mind to climb inside of the car and think to yourself, man, I hope I do good tonight, versus climbing in the car and thinking, man, I'm going to go win this thing. I've got a shot at winning this.
And that's having all the guys on, we 6 to 8 different guys. You've got Buddy Kofoid, and we had Cannon McIntosh to kind of set the bar, and Christopher and Kyle when they would come back, or Rico. You got the bar. Early in the year we might have been struggling a little bit. We bring in Christopher or Kyle, and all of a sudden it's like, there's nothing wrong with our stuff. You guys just got to step it up. This is the bar, and they all did. And these young kids got something to judge off of,
So who have you got in the shop now? Jay's there, right?
Jay, we hired Jay back. Jay, after driving for me, and was gone doing all kinds of different things.
I was going to say, let's say the last name, Jay Drake.
Jay Drake,
I want to say that because in the very beginning of your career that you're talking about, Jay Drake was your driver, and he's still with you today.
Yeah, I think it's probably been 4 years now. I hired a couple of things is, I'm not a great driver coach. you know, I can watch the race car and watch the racetrack and know what to do, and I feed off of that. I can feed off of, you know, the guy that's out in the first heat race and see what my car is doing and know what to change for the next kid and the next kid. But to actually, you know, they come to you sometimes and go, well, what am I doing wrong? What do I need to do? I don't know.
Your car's okay.
Yeah, your car's okay. I don't know what you need to do right, but you're doing something wrong. And that's exactly how I put it to them sometimes. You know, I don't know.
But that's why I asked you who you had.
Yeah.
I knew Jay was there. And
So we brought Jay in. You know, I need somebody that could relate to him and kind of be that driver coach. So that was Jay's main purpose. He had a CDL. I needed a truck driver. And then me and Pete, as our business has grown, we needed a third person to kind of help take some of that off of us. You know, the you know, managing the team members and, you know, getting the trucks if we needed something. You know, it's just one less thing. So Jay probably does more than anybody at Keith Kunz Motorsports. I mean,
For the people that are listening in and aren't familiar with the size of your operation, how many cars do you have working at any given time?
we have probably around 22 cars in the shop, just midgets. We have 15 complete cars at all times. You know, we run 6 to 7. Like last weekend, I think we took 13 cars with us to run 6. We make sure we have spare cars because, you know, the way it works is if we crash today, you know, that kid's going to race tomorrow. You know, we just pull out another car. It's easier to have the stuff already done as to try to rebuild it and
at the track.
At the track, yeah.
In the parking lot of the hotel.
In the parking lot. Yeah. So you can't have enough spares.
I know you need money to run the business, but does Toyota ever come to you and say, "Hey, we'd like to see you put this guy in the car," or is that your call, the driver your call?
99% of the time, it's our call. Yeah, they never. You know,
I mean, when you see, we talked about Jack Irving being the scout, looking at guys. So Jack doesn't come to you and say,
No, he really doesn't. You know, I think he depends on us to kind of tell him who we're looking at, and then he kind of oversees that and watches them. You know,
I'm really curious how that happened.
Yeah, they just kind of look at who's coming to us and who we're looking at, and then judge off of that and watch the results and performance, and that's how they decide who they want to help and stuff like that, you know, by the results that they see coming up through.
So, Daison, how important is it for you to be able to go to a Jay Drake and say, you know, can you help me out with this, or do you see what I'm doing, or I'm struggling with this, you know, can you help me work around it? Is it nice to have that guy?
It's really nice to have that guy, and Jay's really, really good at explaining stuff to drivers in like a driver's sense where we kind of understand it and know exactly what he's talking about. And, you know, it's pretty cool to have him at the track, and you can kind of ask anybody. All the crew chiefs have kind of drove micros and whatnot, so they kind of all knew, you know, how the racing world works and everything. So you can pretty much ask anybody around the pits, and they've all been in a car and kind of, you know, can tell you what you're doing wrong or what you're doing right.
How about Rico?
I haven't really raced with Rico, you know, Indiana Midget Week or whatnot, but, you know, kind of like Keith said, how there's 2 different trailers. I've never been, you know, parked right beside Rico in the same trailer, so I haven't really talked to him that much, but I did lean on him quite a bit at Chili Bowl this year, so that was definitely cool to.
That's what I was talking about. Some of the best people, him and his family. Just unbelievable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if you have a guy like that on your team, he's got to keep the whole thing in an uproar on a regular basis.
Yeah, you know, Rico's a lot of fun to be around. Really, really determined, you know, just, you know, not only very talented, but man, just he wants to win so bad, you know, and that
seems like at anything.
At anything, yeah, anything. You know, and you know, hard on himself probably, you know, probably his own worst, you know, critic, but man, so much talent there, and you know, won a lot of races with Rico, and they're exciting when he wins.
So I know you're still close with your brother. We've talked about some really cool stuff here and important stuff, but let's free this thing up a little bit and have a little bit of fun, because I know you have to have a plethora of racing stories, and some of the best ones are getting to the races or coming back home. And we always talk about Tony Stewart. You know, when he was going to the races, his dad would fall asleep, and but he would fall asleep behind the wheel, and Tony would be leaning over the console, steering it.
Did you ever hear those stories when he was go-kart racing?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
His dad for Daison, his dad could wedge his foot against they call it the doghouse, transmission tunnel, whatever, and so the truck would stay like right on 70.
This is before they had a thing called cruise control.
Yeah. so he would just lean forward over the doghouse, and he'd just steer the truck. Like,
And we asked him, we said, what if something bad happened? He goes, I'd just nudge him. He'd wake up. Oh, take that. I'll roll with it, It's like,
Yeah, I was. We were coming back after the Chili Bowl, and I was driving. I had a van with a 24-foot enclosed trailer.
oh, boy.
And I topped over a hill, and a semi kind of went by me. And next thing you know, I'm out of control, whipping back and forth, and
Oh, man.
down through the median, and turned the van upside down, flipped it over to where the van's laying right all the way on its top, the trailer's on its side, and my dad's hanging from the ceiling. And we had a cooler in there, so everybody was wet. And I had to reach over and pop my dad out of the seatbelt because he was suspended from the ceiling at that point.
anything crazy with you? Got any trips to?
No,
No?
Actually, I don't think I'm
Oh,
old
they're
enough
coming.
to really have
They're
those
coming, yeah,
trips
they're
yet, but
Hey, on the road circus, you'll get him soon enough.
He's young enough. He's got time to get him.
And it's all that stuff when you look back, at your career, the camaraderie and the friendships, and talking about your employees that have been with you for so many years. That always speaks volume of the company and the people that they're working for. So it's. When I look at you and your career, matter of fact, before we came into the studio here, you said first time you've been home for 5 weeks.
We did the shootout and then the Chili Bowl, and I just stayed there the whole time. And then I was home maybe a week, I think, when we went to Florida. And by the time I got back from Florida, I stayed home for maybe 2 weeks, and I had to run down to Sawyer's and build some more cars. And
Here you are 25 years
Yeah.
later, moving from a mobile home and living in a mobile home.
living in a mobile. Yeah, exactly.
I get
You know?
it. I get it. Mine's parked out back right
Yeah,
now.
he's
so.
just been gone for 4 weeks, too.
Yeah.
And I'm the same way, but
So-
I come home and I think, my wife's going to be excited to see me. And then she goes, when are you leaving again?
Yeah.
Yeah, they get used to us being gone. They do.
So I've been home 3 weeks this year is all I've been home. I got home Monday night, and the same thing. My wife's like, when you leaving? How long you going to be gone? Like, you just need to go with me here. Well, we got grandkids now, so that's her.
That- You're
She's
done.
not
That's
leaving
yeah,
the babies.
yeah.
No, not
So-
leaving the babies.
yeah, she ain't leaving the baby. So our micro deal's been real good, and we run this week here, and Daison's been helping me find the balance on the cars, and since that's where he comes from, it's really, I needed somebody good again to get the understanding of them cars, and they're so similar to the midgets, so I've adapted, and he was a top 3 every race there in the last week that we run. So, and I've got a lot of new kids coming up. Gavin Bushell came and drove for me down there at this weekend. He's going to get to do a little bit of midget stuff with me. I got a kid from Pennsylvania, Gavin Miller, is going to start with me this week. Another kid out of Tennessee, Blake Daniels, he's going to run some micro stuff. And I've even got a guy coming from New Zealand, Campbell Stewart, who's going to run stuff for me this summer.
I see, this world is full of a law of percentages, and there's more and more girls joining the ranks
Yes.
by the day. So, once we reach whatever that magical number is for that percentage, and you never know when we're going to stumble along, amazing talent. But I just keep waiting. I keep thinking one of these girls
Yep.
is really going to wake everybody up and shoot to the front.
Yeah, we've had some really good girls. Holly Shelton was kind of the start of our female driver development diversity program through Toyota, and she was with us for 3 years and did a really good job. They kind of started that whole thing through the diversity program, but again, I think it was a startup deal where they didn't know what exactly they were going to do. And they never gave Holly the opportunities to go do some stock car stuff and show what she could do, because she was very, very talented. And then again, she was at that age where she was 23 or 24, and it's like, there's nothing we're going to be able to complete this with her, so it was time to try somebody else, and we tried Holly Holland, one year, and then they fed her some stock car stuff last year, and now Kaylee Bryson, she came on the scene and is getting some stock car opportunities this year. But yeah, there's so many more girls that are running and getting better and better. Jade Averdesian is very, very talented, probably the most talented one out there right now at 14 years old. So as more and more girls come along, they're getting better and starting to, the percentages is what it is of females versus males. They're going to be more and more running up front and winning races.
We haven't had a chance to talk about your brother, another great story in its own right, but and so much success as well. But what were you guys doing as kids? I mean, obviously now on the motorcycles, but what was life like, in the Kunz house?
Riding motorcycles was all we ever did, until we got time to, kind of got into high school and that, and then a couple of them had some few street rods, and we all started hanging around each other. But eventually we all started going to midget racing, going up through there, and it's just all we've ever done.
How much have you seen the cars actually change in terms of car setup and how they act, how they react? How maybe the chassis have advanced, whatever the case may be. But how much have they changed from the '90s to today?
When you being involved in it, you kind of look at them and you go, nothing's really changed. None of the pickups are different. All the points are the same, this, that, and the other. But then when you see one sitting there that's from the '90s, you're like, wow, what a difference, Well, when you watch the races, I watched the Chili Bowls from when we first won it in '94 with Hillenberg, and I look at a race today and I'm like, God, they look so slow and horrible. And
if we're sitting in the grandstands, or maybe if somebody's sitting with us, we're watching prelim nights or something at Chili Bowl, some of the old timer guys will look and say, our cars never drove off the turn like that. They just did not have that grip.
The cars are so much more stable, and you can drive them twice as hard, and they hook up. They don't want to turn over, So there's the competitiveness is so close now. There's so many guys. Back then, you walk into Chili Bowl and you got 10 guys, and I can name you 10 guys that are going to be competitive and be in Saturday night. Now it's 50 guys that you're just wondering who's going to miss the show.
I get goosebumps talking about it because it is the most amazing thing to watch those guys not lift, know where the other guy's going to go, anticipating what they need to do, keeping an eye on the guy behind them that's going to try to slide them and do the same thing. It's, man, talk about having your head on.
It's so tough and so hard, and it's hard to stay mentally focused anymore there. It's a tough deal.
So what's the goal there, Daison? I know you're going to tell me Cup, but what's the goal to run up through and the next handful of years here, and of course make your run at your career?
Yeah, like you said, definitely Cup. But the next handful of years, I definitely want to try to get dabbled into a little bit of pavement stuff. But main goal this year is to try to win a couple of USAC races and get our name really known out here. Is that'll be the big thing. And just to come out here and race with these guys is something that I've dreamed of. And now that we're finally doing it, it's something to be really cool about.
So I can see you going to Cup, of course, and we've seen that path happen. I'm often surprised that people like you in the open wheel world don't seem to mention IndyCar. Any thoughts of IndyCar?
Not really. We watch the Indianapolis 500 every year, of course, but Indy has not been something I've ever been not necessarily a fan of. Like I always watch it or anything, but I don't.
It's not something that you're drawn to.
Yeah, it's not something that I'm drawn to for sure. I just really don't watch it. Like on an everyday weekend or keep up the results or. I couldn't even, name you a guy that races in it now. So,
do you find that odd, Keith? Because it is open wheel to open wheel versus open wheel to I want to get in a Cup car.
Well, I think a lot of that is the connection with NASCAR. NASCAR has the connection with open wheel. All the way from the teams to the manufacturers, they're involved. They're accessible to our guys. And he knows a lot of the NASCAR drivers and is friends with them, and you know, team members that are NASCAR team members. A lot of them come from the open wheel stuff, and you know, we go to a midget race or a micro race, and you know, you go to Millbridge and all of the NASCAR crews are there. You know, we don't have that connection with IndyCar stuff. You know, you never see them guys, and it's just a different world nowadays, I think, than we are. But the NASCAR, there's such a connection, you know, and it's just the way it is.
So with you and the world that you're in and all these cars that you mentioned that are inside of your shop, and you're adding more with the micros,
Yep.
We have our good friends at Rhino Classifieds that sell racing parts. Actually, Ryan Matursky, the president of Rhino Classifieds, started his career because a buddy of his had a garage full of old racing stuff, and he wanted to know if he could help him sell it. So that's what he did, and he's come out with a business called Rhino Classifieds, where they're selling used race car parts. How important is something like that to you? I mean, do you guys recycle that stuff? Do you sell it back off? Is that a good platform for you to take advantage of to the fans out there that might want to get into this world?
We don't sell. We sell a little bit of stuff, but honestly, we use our stuff up. I mean, there's some of our cars that are 4 or 5 years old, and you know, we use the IPC carbon body stuff now, and I mean, there's some of that stuff 7, 8 years old, and repair it, and you know, the frames can be straightened, and we run stuff. We go through a lot of equipment, you know, run that many cars and that many races, and we get our use out of it to where it's usually not sellable when we're done with it.
Wow, that's using one up for sure.
It's called economics, getting the most for your money.
Well, we can't thank you guys enough for taking time out, especially Keith. Your schedule's amazing. I mean, the thought goes through my head. I'm like, I'm just going to call and ask. I don't know. My chances are slim and none, and Slim's probably out to lunch, but I'm going to ask. And you responded right away and said, sure, man, and I can't thank you enough for taking a little bit of time. I know you've got a shop full of cars that would love your attention as you sit here and goof off with us a little bit, but can't thank you enough for coming over, man.
Yeah, you're making me work late tonight.
Sorry about that. And Daison, thank you as well, man. It's great to have you in here, and great to see the young face be hungry and go chase his dreams. It's really cool stuff.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. Appreciate talking to anybody I can. It's really cool to be on these shows.
Yeah, very well spoken, certainly very mature, and I think that's what this industry does. You've got to step up to the plate, and it looks like you're doing a great job of that. So best of luck here in 2021. Hope you get that first USAC national event win, and plenty more to go with it as well. Again, thank you to Daison Pursley and Keith Kunz himself for coming on to this episode of The Skinny, and we hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for being with us here on The Skinny. This episode has been brought to you by Toyota, Rhino Classifieds, Dream Giveaway, and General Tire. For the latest in sunglasses, optical frames, accessories, and apparel, be sure to check out fatheads.com. That's Fatheads with a Z. Production facilities provided by Fatheads Eyewear Studios. All rights reserved.